Done.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for joining the CLEAN Network call for Tuesday, August 24th, 2021. We have been doing weekly calls basically since 2008, a very stunning accomplishment of a informal, lowly resourced network, but we still have a lot to talk about. So, and here we are. So today is an informal conversation. I'm Frank Niepold. I'm at NOAA. I'm the Climate Education Senior Program Manager and Coordinator for Climate Education, and I'm your facilitator today. So given today is an informal conversation, I'm not looking at the which view, I'm going to put on gallery view. I think we all know each other. Is that correct? Do we all know each other? So just making sure that we don't have to do introductions, but I don't think that's necessary. Does anybody feel that introductions are necessary? Janie, you're relatively new to us, but do you feel comfortable?
I feel like I know people and feel known by people. I'm okay.
Okay, well that's the key thing. Tamara, do you feel like you know people that are here?
Yeah, I think so. A few,
maybe. So good. Well, let's go right to announcements. And while we're doing announcements, if there are any topics that need to be explored, if anybody has something that needs to be advanced in the community, we can get to those. If you want to throw them into the chat, I'll keep that open. But let's start with announcements. Anything?
I have an announcement. We have an AMS session, and that's going to be sponsored or convened. Actually, 3 of us are on here: Wendy, Frank, and myself, and Deb too. 4 of us are on here, and then Jen Kretzer as well is another convener on that. And abstracts for the American Meteorological Society annual meeting are due September 1st, so coming up in just about a week. So if anybody is interested in attending that and wants to submit to our session, we'll put the link for the abstract submission into the chat. Accelerating Climate Change Education is the name. It's in a list of the education, and then it's co-sponsored by the Education Conference at AMS and the DEI Symposium and the Climate Change Variability Conference happening there too. So I'll put the link in the chat for you all to try to find that and submit to our session if you're interested.
Thanks,
I was
Katie.
typing in the chat as you spoke, Katie, so we were both going to announce about it, but I think it deserved an oral introduction, so good for you. For those that are unfamiliar with the format of an AMS annual meeting, it's unique in my experience, and I have been to many AMS meetings, that there is a session co-sponsored by 3 conferences, which means there's a unique opportunity to have a large audience and some different people in the room. Often when we are in the education conference talking about matters of education, we're talking to a small focus group of our friends and maybe a few new people. But this one is really got the chance to reach some new voices and have them both contribute and hear about the work that's going on. So terrific opportunity to present.
I agree, Wendy. Thanks for that context. It's a really good point. And I'm very excited we got the sponsorship from all 3 of the conferences. So.
Wendy, what's the position AMS is taking on virtual versus in the face-to-face? Is this a blended conference? Is it a only face-to-face, or can you talk a little bit about that?
I'd be happy to. You can imagine the situation is dynamic. So whatever I say as of today doesn't mean that's what the decisions this fall will be. At this point, due to hotel contracts and obligations, we are planning for an all in-person meeting with some key sections being broadcast virtually, and you won't necessarily have to be registered to see those. we are unable, due to our size and the scope of the meeting we hold, to stream everything. It's just not viable. Unlike NWA, which is meeting right now, where they have no concurrent sessions. So they have to set up one stream and stream it, and you get to participate at the distance, almost like in person. We have something like 20 concurrent sessions happen. And so the financial cost to stream all of them and provide full interactive engagement for everyone at a distance and in person, it's just not financially viable. People would never pay the registration fee that it would cost to cover that. And unlike our colleagues at AGU, they have big enough attendance that they can afford to do many multiple streams. And so we're caught in the middle there. So there will be virtual opportunities to participate. I know that you can submit posters and abstracts noting you'd like to be virtual, but that doesn't mean you will have the same experience as being in person. And that is the situation at this point. AMS is planning with a safe meeting in mind. And unlike some other conferences, the decision at this point is not a required vaccination. The statement is we expect all attendees to be vaccinated and all will be asked to remain masked. And that is a slightly different position, but that I was not sure about that decision myself until it was talked through. I'm in a meeting where I realized part of the decision was both a person power and a privacy power for enforcing the you have to be vaccinated to attend, because as far as we know, no one's actually solved for a large conference how to do that for your attendees, and also creating a false sense of security by people thinking, oh, if every person is vaccinated, I'm going to run around unmasked, and we're actually going to mandate masks. And so no false sense of security. Expectation is vaccinated. Requirement is to wear masks, and hopefully that will keep those that choose to be on site safe.
Gotcha.
That's everything I know.
That's so wonderful. Only reason I asked you that, Wendy, was because I just learned yesterday that feds must be virtual if a virtual option exists.
Interesting.
Yep.
Well, AMS would say that for most of the conference, virtual options do not exist.
There you go. So we'll see how this all shakes out, but thank you. Eric.
Yeah, it just when you're making me think of an event that I'm working with a number of different groups on. The gist of it is what's happening in Bay Area public institutions with respect to reopening or not. So examples are Cal Academy, large scale science centers opening back up, and it's doing events. My old science center, Chabot, is not open yet. They're pivoting and they're partnering with NASA now, and they're getting their exhibits and going to reimagine and reopen. But we want to create an event that just sort of talks about this process of reopening and how has it changed the field of informal education and science and public spaces, really public gathering spaces at the end of the day. So it could be art museums, science centers, aquaria, et cetera. So, but I think a line of connection to our work in CLEAN is outdoor education writ large is going to just become that much more important. And climate science, environmental education, being outside is a huge shift in thinking, even at the K-12 in the K-12 environment. We get kids outside, do gardening, fresh air, distancing, all of that. So anyway, we're working on that. We're exploring the idea of a larger Bay Area event that would sort of showcase different institutions, what they're doing, getting an opportunity to tell their stories. So the audiences could be anywhere from the public, what they can do, what's out there for them now in this sort of fluid environment, to teachers. What can teachers do this year? Can they take a field trip to the local science centers at all? Is it going to be digital, only? What are folks offering for them? And then the informal practitioners themselves. What's the opportunities for our careers like me? And what should we be knowing and doing to advance ourselves in this new environment? Because creating a hybrid, that's on the thinking, is we want to do a hybrid, a program. So we give opportunities for people to sort of convene, let's say Cal Academy or on the USS Hornet, which is a aircraft carrier museum essentially. But folks, a lot of people still want to be safe and not do that, or they want to access it from somewhere else, then you all would be invited if, if we could do it virtually. So I think it's a huge switch in our thinking, and it requires a lot, kind of what Wendy was saying, it requires a tremendous amount of resources if you're really going to put on a hybrid thing. It's kind of, if you go all in one way or the other, it's a lot easier than this combo deal. So anyway, just throwing that out there, it's something we're exploring, and if there is a real clean tie, I'll reach back out to the community and propose something, but that it's just kind of exploring it right now.
So Eric, I think there's a richness of conversation here that we could probably come back into after announcements, because there's some other forms of education that would very strongly align with what you're talking about. So let's do that. Janie, I saw your hand come up, and then Patrick.
Yeah, thanks, Frank. Through my organization, the Reading and Writing Project in Columbia, I've been assigned these climate days across the next school year, some of which are kind of 1 to 3 day cycles. And then there's also a specialty group, which meets across 10 days throughout the year, which are basically can be lab sites for in-house PD around climate change with history, science, and ELA teachers. And so I guess I'm announcing this because if there's anybody, I kind of get to make up what I do. So I would like to lean on my community. So anybody you think I should be talking to, or resources that you think are really exciting, please let me know. And I guess the idea for this is to create a kind of more systemic model for what ongoing in-house PD can look like around climate change that's interdisciplinary.
Janie, can you put that setup and that query in your email in the chat, just so that people can follow up with you? You're muted.
Yes, it'll take me a second to make it succinct, but
time.
yes, I will. Thanks.
Awesome. Patrick, what you got?
Oh, I thought I'd just kind of check in with folks, since we're starting a new round of Clean Talks, a new clean season, if you will, with a bit of a new system, to remind folks that we're doing a speaker and then an informal topic and going every other week. And we're opening it up to focus a little bit more on specific topics. So if you have a topic that you are excited about or have been curious about, please shoot me an email, and we're starting to schedule up those topic days already. For this one, I had, looking at the IPCC report in terms of how we deal with that in climate ed, we kind of brushed over that when it happened, but it's definitely still open. But I think it helps to have a topic of focus to create a rich conversation. And I also wanted to remind folks, if you missed Deb's talk last week, it is recorded and you can check it out, as you should, because it's pretty cool to hear about her recent work. Thanks.
Deb, would you mind just setting up what that was, so to trigger the value of the recording?
I shared a little bit about what Clear Environmental, the nonprofit that I've started. It has a profit arm just for very specific things, which you're more aware of, Frank. But it's a nonprofit based in Canada and registered in Washington State, and just the type of work that we're engaged in around climate empowerment, learning, and action work.
Wonderful.
I do have, if you're done, Patrick, I do have one other thing. I put it in the chat. So tonight, actually it's CU Boulder, though I'm in Canada. There is the first of 3-part series that I'm speaking at with Megan Bang and David Pello. So David Pello is the chair of the Environmental Studies and Director of Global Environmental Justice at UC Santa Barbara, and Megan Bang, most of you know, but she's at Northwestern, and she's also the vice president of the Spencer Foundation. And so the 3 of us are speaking around issues of justice related to climate learning. And I was just like, when I found out who else was on the panel, I was like, dang. So I was just a little humbled, to say the least. And so really excited to hear what those folks are doing and sort of name some of the systemic supports that are needed. So it's I put the link for the series. The series has 3 parts. The first part is around this issue of justice, and then the second part is emotion and climate change learning, and this third part is action in climate change learning. And when I talked with the organizers and they told me it was like justice, motion, and action, I'm like, I don't know which one to pick. So that was kind of fun.
It's awesome. Thanks, Deb. I see we are definitely demonstrating everyone's working at home here. I've got my dog right up there who had to be here. And Colleen, I see you have a young one with you. So
also, just to Wendy's point, I'm not sure there's, at the very top, there's like a Facebook and Instagram link for the session, but I don't know how else to, I mean, other people are probably better at that than I have some.
Okay, I mean, if it starts tonight, that's probably not the best method, so.
right. All right, Patrick, I'm getting schooled here as a facilitator. I can move fast. I used to be a teacher. So I hear there is a topic of record. And actually I see the topic, Eric, you were bringing forth actually relate to that topic potentially, but do we have any other announcements before we jump into that topic? And the dog up here that's Rico. He's a miniature Bernedoodle, but he's not curly. He's got straight hair. He sheds like you wouldn't believe. That wasn't supposed to be happening, but Punnett squares definitely show that can happen. Didn't know that. I didn't do my genetics research before I understood the mysteries of doodling. Yeah, he's sweet as anything, and it must be within 3 feet of a person. They're super social dogs, so that's why he's right there. And there's lots of chaos going on in my house, so that's why I'm here today, so that noise does not get in the way of us. But Rico, as in Puerto Rico, as an homage to Maria and keeping our fellowship with the people of Puerto Rico. He's a daily reminder of that commitment. So any other topics? Amy, I mean, something big happened at 10 Strands recently. Do you want to bring that forth, or you want to keep that on the quiet for now?
Hi, you guys. I think it's been mentioned here before when it first happened. I don't know if you were at that meeting, but
It's not.
yes, just we do have our climate change, our 6 million in the budget for climate change and environmental justice curriculum in the works. And we do have, separate from this, this draft, and I know that this, we talked about it last time, the spicy, mild, and hot. So in the chat, this is that document that has gone through a few more revisions since we last talked about. It's a top 10 list for educational leaders related to climate change, but it's made by Andra. So of course there's like 30 things on it because she's really not a minimalist. But we are circulating that, and feel free to share it, comment. She was fiery when she wrote this. So there you go.
Wonderful. Thanks, Amy. So do we have anything else before we're at 1:21, we can move into the topic about the IPCC AR6 working group 1. Just for clarity, my boss's boss is the vice chair of one of the 3 vice chairs, Co Barrett. So it's a big deal for us that this came out. But what's the setup, Patrick? I mean, it just kind of happened. It's a big deal for our community. And what's the connection between the work we do and that code red scientific report? That's new language.
I guess when it first came out, there was a little talk here, and I feel like a lot of folks were kind of going like, okay, another alarm. So like, we obviously get it. And I'm not sure to what degree it's helping students to hear that things are worse and worse and worse. So I think a big part of the question was, with this in the news and in the buzz, how do we bring this into climate education?
Yeah, that's a great setup, Patrick. I have lots to say, but I'm the facilitator. So let's not do that. So let's kick it around. What do you all think?
I mean, one of the conversations I had yesterday with colleagues that work with the district, Oakland district, was I think students, given what you just said, Frank, students are ready for the real deal, I think. In other words, we've talked a lot about dystopian futures and not telling that story, or not hyper telling that story. But then there's the sort of the other side of it. It's a utopian future and everything's going to be golden, and that, you know, is also not true. So I think students in this moment would most benefit from real talk. In other words, and one real thing that I felt in sort of readopting, I mentioned to you a couple weeks ago, my wife's school garden, how much you can grow in a really small space, you know, with effort, but it's not, you know, it's not like you have to spend your whole life just being a farmer to feed yourself, at least in large part, some pretty healthy greens from a very small space. So the point of that is, you know, there's so much students can do, and if it gets to the basics of feeding themselves and learning how to do that, that is a basic human survival skill that is really important. And if, you know, California's running out of water, you know, and we're coming into a new normal, right? We're all realizing that with the wildfires and the drought and everything. But that doesn't mean the world's ending, but it does mean we have to shift our thinking and our ways of doing things. And at the very youngest levels, for students to know, this is a really important skill that it would seem like I can go to Safeway anytime and get what I want, but at the same time, you know, I think I'm just saying, like with this IPCC report, the thing that sounds like it's resonated is they really looked at the extreme scenarios for the first time and validated those, which was a different approach than we've taken in the past. And so why not just mirror that in our student teaching and say, this is what's happening, but there's so much we can do within this new and changing environment.
Awesome. Frank, I see your hand. If we can use the hands, or you can use your visual hands, both of them work.
Tamara beat me to the punch, so.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tamara, your hand is actually, there it is. Ah, sorry. Your hand is in a book and it was covered by the chat. So now I got to resize my, thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Frank.
Okay, thank you very much. I've sort of struggled with this a bit myself. I mean, even as I do these world climate negotiations with the C-ROADS model and the climate solutions workshop with the En-ROADS model, as time has gone on, it's become increasingly clear that it's really hard to just mitigate and get to the goal of no more than 2 degrees C by 2100. So I use that as a teaching moment. Now I am teaching college students, so they're age 18 to 21, but that there's no silver bullet. It's going to take a whole lot of different solutions, but also that we can't just depend on mitigation alone, that we're going to have to adapt to changes. And so there are actions to do, things that they can do, careers they can pursue that get at that too. So that is a positive action kind of step to adapting to the changes, as well as the work to mitigate it. And that's the way I've tried to frame it for my students. And I think that it's a good strategy for high school students. And I mean, even younger possibly, but you tone the message such that you do have these 2 different activities that work together.
Thanks, Tamara. Frank.
So 2 things rumbling through my head right now is, you know, one of the take homes that I got out of reading the summary was that no matter which route we go down, it's going to get worse. But there's a difference between really bad and bad. And somehow that's an important part of the narrative that we need to start working with students on. And I don't know how to do that. But I think that's an important piece of what happens from this point forward. The other thing that I want to bring up here really briefly is in regards to something that was on the webpage for AR6, was that they have their interactive atlas. And as Eric knows and Nancy knows, because they're helping me with this, trying to write an activity for that will go into the Climate Toolkit 2.0. The one thing, Frank, Deb, anybody else here that might have connections with IPCC, I'm trying to figure out the name of a person who was involved with that project that I can ask questions out of.
So Frank, just as a quick note, if you send me a formal request, I will put it to the vice chair.
Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay. Tiffany, I think you were up next, and then Deb.
Okay, great. Hi. This is just to piggyback a little bit on what Tamara was talking about. I had the opportunity to listen to Debbie Raphael the other day, who's the Director of Sustainability for the City of San Francisco. And she had this wonderful analogy that we've been trying to frame our work around, where when you think about climate education, you think about where can I get, like, you think about Scrabble, and how can I get a triple word score with my climate education impact? So she talked about policies for the City of San Francisco. They enact them around, it has to hit that triple word score, it has to be around adaptation, mitigation, and equity. And so with all of our climate education work, we're really trying to get that triple word score with everything, because just like Tamara said, it can't just be one, it can't just be two, it's gotta be all three. And really doubling down on what does that look like for you on the local level. This is where we're finding the best impact and the best buy-in and actionable steps for students, and really connecting students to local adaptation, local mitigation, and local equity causes around climate is where we've been able to have our best impact. So just wanted to throw that out there.
Thanks, Tiffany. Deb, you're up, and then Colleen.
So many thoughts flew past my head, and now I'm trying to remember which one was the one I wanted to say.
Having similar problem.
So I think, you know, one of the challenges that we're facing in this moment, it was Frank Granshaw, that's what it was, who made me think of this. So is that you know, do we teach about like it's so bad, or do we teach about that it's not so bad as it could be? And one of the things that we're seeing out of the research being done in emotion and psychology and like processing is that there is a freezing related to despair that's caused when folks are really told the level of the reality. Not to say we need to live with our heads in the sand. That's not what we should be doing. But one of the things that we're thinking about, especially with youth, but I actually would say across the board is not a bad strategy, is to take a solution-centered learning strategy. So we don't teach problem first, we teach solutions and actions first, and then we understand why those solutions or actions lead to mitigation or are related to adaptation. So we go in from the action angle, and the reason for that is it fosters agency first and hopefulness first, and then sort of gets into the meat of like the systems thinking and understanding that. And I think that that's really, really critical on a lot of different fronts, because sometimes if we start the other way around, we get into despair so far that we never get to action. And honestly, my reason for being involved in this work is to get people into action. So like, let's figure out how to get them moving into action in ways that are meaningful. And of course, as a human being, I also don't want to leave a lot of people in this dark place. So, you know, I have moments, and I know all of you know me as like the generally glass half full person. By the way, the glass is always just totally full. There's air in it. But just thinking about the idea of like, we need to as well own that. And if we're constantly teaching about the problem, there's emotional harm that we're experiencing too. And it's exhausting. So like really trying to center on those spaces of action and expanding them.
Colleen?
Yeah, my main thought was similar to Deb's, is focusing on that solution based part and kind of, you know, thinking about the story of it, which I'm kind of surprised you didn't say that with your series that you're working on right now. But like, how do you tell that story, and how do you tell especially those solutions that do hit all three of those? Like, I love talking about the in-river hydrokinetic system in Igiugig, Alaska. That's this, you know, was developed by Alaska, the village, the community is Alaska Native, by a woman who drove it and is offsetting their diesel use, right? Like it really hits all three of those things. And so like telling the story of that, the solutions that's local to us here in Alaska. And so anyway, I don't know that I have anything new to add to that, but that I'm appreciating this conversation and kind of continuing this that we have been talking about the last few weeks too.
So I'm going to take off my facilitator hat for just a second. One of the other pieces of this work, I'm totally building on what has been said so far, and I definitely resonate with your approach, Deb, because when I speak with youth for years, they've been like, we get the problem. If we hear it, we hear the problem, and we want to be fired up and ready to go on the solution. But the skills and the time and the knowledge to be able to do the solutions, they're not getting it. They're not getting any of that. And the problem is, as the problem part shows up, and then maybe the solution might happen in another class, another year, in another, by another teacher, maybe. And so they're like way unbalanced on the problem relative to the solution. And so, I mean, if you're going to do one thing, start with a solution. I mean, that's I've never heard anybody say that, Deb. So that's very resonant with me. But there's another piece that I can't remember, I think it was you, Tiffany, said about the triple win. I think it's actually, there's more than just triple, because one of the things that a lot of the NOAA PIs who are working on environmental literacy grant programs that have a strong equity and justice focus is they're running into challenge in communities that are disproportionately impacted and marginalized, communities where climate is not the top priority. And so coming in with a climate triple win still feels like you're not connecting to the real issues they're facing. That's what the early word we're hearing, right? And that it makes some sense. And so this idea that, I can't remember the name of the woman from Climate Interactive who advances multi-solving, but that idea of multi-solving, right? Because there are health benefits to climate action. There are economic benefits, there are social benefits. They're not just climate benefits. And so this idea of multi-solving is it's a little bit bigger of an idea than triple win, because there were, two climate and one social. I think it's actually more social that addresses communities' top priorities while solving climate priorities. And that's what multi-solving brings. So I think, I would say what you said, Deb, with multi-solving as a principal focus would definitely feel resonant. And the last point is the IPCC third report comes out months and months, which is all about what we're doing to solve it. Why? Why are they separated by months? Why isn't that one the first report? And the scientific community are just locked in this old scientific, got to make a case, got to make a case, got to make a case. And I'm like, it's doing damage, unfortunately. And I'm on the record saying this as a civil servant at NOAA in the global change community, but they're doing damage to our community because the code red isn't working. And yet they keep on, like, I don't know what code comes after red, but that's the next one coming. Eric, I see your hand, and then Frank, and then Cheney. That's the order I see them on my screen. Let's go that way.
In air quality, it's code purple, Frank. I don't know about see a lot of that. It makes me think about some of the interdisciplinary, the ways, some of the conversations we've had in past meetings about the need for a larger umbrella for the climate conversation. And also the presentation that was done on young women and women in STEM and the ways that women can see themselves in these various careers, pathways. And so I think it's really similar with climate science. You don't have to be a climate activist or a climate scientist to be part of the solution. You can be a hydrologist, you can be a chemist, you can be a physicist, there's so many entry points, and you can do really good work. And I had a conversation this morning with a colleague about, the ozone hole that Molina, made folks aware of, and the chemistry that's involved in understanding that process and how complex it is. And then what kind of, going from pivoting from CFCs to HCFCs, and then hopefully into something that's completely non-depleting, impacting the whole, right? So there's so much there, but the students have to see themselves, like you can be passionate and really good at a discipline, and then it obviously bridges into the other disciplines, the storytelling piece that we've really been talking about lately, and I think is huge. To be a good storyteller is a whole different skill set than a scientist, and the scientists need to be versed in that, right? And that's what we're seeing is that it's, yeah, I think that it's a legacy thing, Frank. That's why we're probably still approaching it that way, right? But and I feel like the gap I'm seeing right now is at the high school level. Like I'm feeling like K-8, you get some level of interdisciplinary by design. K-5, maybe middle school, you still have some of it. But in high school, I feel like there's this gap. I know at least in Oakland, there's a yearning for an interdisciplinary curriculum that would address climate, and there's a need for it. So the work that Amy, I think you're doing with San Mateo is huge, because I think that could fill the gap, help fill the gap for California. And then at the college level, there's tons of stuff happening, right? And all the stuff that's been presented over the years, over the months, years, CLEAN, great work happening at the college level, interdisciplinary ties and efforts, but obviously need to be replicated and expanded, across universities worldwide, really. But I feel like this high school place, maybe there's something that's just sort of in conversations, and I'm sure there's exemplar high schools out there doing great work in this space. I just haven't heard about them as much.
Gotcha. Let's go Frank, Cheney, and Patrick. And if you want to raise your hand, get in here. And if something is like stacking on something that was said, and like Frank, are you continuing to build? And let's maybe add that practice here, because if we're zigzagging all over the place, it's kind of makes it a little hard. But if you're building on something that's continue, let's keep on building. And then if we have a new direction, let's put that off to the parking lot, and then we'll pick it in.
Okay, well, I'm building on something you said, Frank, but I'm also zigzagging just a little bit.
Go for it.
Okay, so I think in response to, I resonate with what you're saying about popping out volume 1 first in terms of physical science basis and just basically the gloom and doom. That does a little bit of disservice, but I'm also looking at that from the political perspective, which is, you remember SR 1.5 came out just before Poland. This one's coming out just before Glasgow. So I understand the rationale, and I'm not quite certain I would say that it's a bad thing that it's come out. I think the other part of things too is, as I read I really haven't got into the bulk of the report yet, but I certainly have gone through and read the SPM. And what I get out of that, and this goes to my zigzag, what I get out of that one of our friends seemed to totally miss is that she picked up out of it that the IPCC was saying it's over with. There's nothing more that can be done. And that's not what I read. And so that, I think that is in there. my zigzag, which is something that I'll put out on the table, and if we want to come back to it later, great. If you want to ignore it, great. But I'm going to look at this from a different perspective, which has to do with all my gray hair, which is the reaction of people my age to this. And it, to some extent, when we talk about reaching out to the general public about climate issues, there's an emphasis on youth, and I think that's very appropriate. But I think there's also an important piece in that, which is an emphasis on people who are older. And I say that from the perspective of practicality. Look at the age of our current president, look at the age of the past president, look at the age of many of the people in political power. But I also look at that from the perspective that we're grandparents. And we interact with our grandkids, which is that sort of connection. And I all this comes down to a question, which is, have any of you had any experience working with older people on some of these issues? And if so, what was it like? What did you do?
Do we want to react? Why don't we react to that? We have time, and then we'll come back. Is that okay, Patrick? And
That's what I was going to suggest. Let's pick up that thread for a minute before I go anywhere.
I have a reaction to that one.
Go for it.
So one of the things that we did when we were working with the Access group across science coherence across the states is we surveyed them about different equity projects. And one of the equity projects is around intergenerational justice and equity. And that doesn't go just to youth, it goes to elders as well. And it really is about the way that we work across different knowledge bases and generations. And so one of the things that I think has been really helpful in some of the work that I've done, and again, it's not in all the work. Here's the thing that defines the different equity projects. Anyway, is related to working with whole communities. So like, and this is my cautionary sort of note for folks who work with youth, is when we work with youth, youth are asking us to solve the problem, not asking to be the ones to solve the problem, but they are asking for a seat at the table. So their voices are heard constantly. And so like they're asking to be worked with, not to be handed all the work. And so like when we think about that, we have to think about how are we doing that? And so like creating collaborative processes so that we're actually bringing youth into different mentorship and learning from them and seeing the resources that they have to like open our eyes to the like. And so the several projects I've done that have like done that kind of multi-age thing across community, but they're community locally situated. And one of the biggest things that we've learned from that type of work is that many of the things that we say, like as sort of older people working in the space, I think actually now I'm one of those older people working in the space. Many of the things that we say are like, oh, well, we can't change that, or we can't do that. And the youth are like, why? And that is the question that we have to constantly hear from them and interrogate ourselves around. So being in contact with youth constantly helps us think about, well, why can't we change that, right? And so that's been really helpful.
Do others want to pick up this thread? It looks like Tiffany and Cheney, your hand's still up from the previous line.
So just to piggyback on what Deb just said, this is tapping into what Frank was talking about. For us is a practicality thing. We need to tap into people with the bandwidth to help. And so you have, in the work that we do, we have teachers, and teachers, their bandwidth is so thin right now. They're, after 27 years as an elementary educator, every year it's one unfunded mandate after another. Yes, we should absolutely be teaching anti-racism. Yes, we should absolutely be teaching climate action. We should absolutely be teaching mindfulness and so especially with COVID, as teachers see the social emotional needs of their students rising, tapping into retired people and younger college students to come together to help teachers whose bandwidth is so thin. So not only is there an experience and a wisdom component, but there's a practicality around retirees. We have so many retirees that we're already doing volunteer work in their community anyway, and giving them structure around it, around climate. They're just thrilled to have a way to help teachers that's about climate. So not just the wisdom component, but the practicality component of people with experience and people with bandwidth to help teachers who have so little bandwidth.
Frank, did you raise your hand again?
Yeah, I did. Real quick, the practical reason why why I approach this topic is because one of the things that's happening right now is that I'm finding myself talking to folks in our Quaker meeting a lot and circles of friends, etc. And in some cases, almost being asked to bolster their spirits. Tell me something that's good. And it's, I appreciate the things that have been put into the chat in terms of programs people have been talking about. And Tiffany, what you mentioned and what Deb, you mentioned. I would really appreciate being kept in the loop in terms of anything regarding dealing with climate education, if you will, with older folks. Because I certainly could use the support in terms of hearing what other people are doing and maybe participating in it.
Well, you know, Frank, one thing the co-chairs of the CLEAN Leadership Board are convened right after this meeting, and we're kind of opening up, what does the CLEAN community need? What do we need to lead? How do we lead that? And I think your you know, ideas of communities to practice. And you know, there are areas in our group that groups would like to talk to other people who are doing similar work or have a need to get into that kind of work. And I think you're teeing up perhaps a direction for a new way of leading CLEAN, because you know, what we were doing, you know, maybe we need to do something a little differently, because I think the need is different. And so I thank you for raising that kind of need, right? Because leadership is distributed. We're all leaders. And so we're rethinking some of the fundamental things as we go into the next couple of years. So that's in 11 minutes. So I thank you for that. And, you know, I think that makes some sense. Does anybody else have any other points on this side thread that Frank brought forth? Because then we can come back to Patrick, or we can go somewhere else. All right, I'm not seeing anything. So Patrick, does it still feel what, what you still want to go where you were going?
Yeah, I do.
All right, let's go.
I don't think it's necessarily disconnected.
Okay.
So something Eric said perked up my ears, because like I hear it, and I hear it as a common theme around climate and science. And that is, well, climate scientists need to be a lot better communicators. And I've heard that for many, many years, and I don't necessarily agree. And I think it speaks to a broader issue, and that is, so often in this realm, we're expecting people to do so many things, some of which they may not be good at all. And I don't necessarily feel like scientists need to be better communicators. I think they need to create better partnerships and be willing to engage in those partnerships consistently over time, and in an equal power dynamic. Because so often what I see in the science realms, even when there are partnerships, it's, we will let you communicate our science. It's not an interconnected conversation of, well, who are you working with? How can we help you to report to them. And I think it has to do with this hierarchical system in which science still sits at the tops in many realms. And the IPCC report speaks to that a little bit, because it's another form of, ta-da, here's society, take it. We did our job, we're science, you know, and it's so frustrating that there wasn't an underlying partnership before that came out to say, well, how do we communicate this in a way that is hearable, usable, actionable, in coordination with the science that came out? And I mentioned, I don't think it's disconnected from the last thread, because I also think that there's a lot of silos going on, and one of them is generational. And that when we're looking at those conversations that could happen between multiple generations, neither side necessarily has the skills to do so. And really working in a space in which we can facilitate those conversations and enable them to happen in a way that makes it comfortable for both sides, I think can be really special. So I feel like what we're lacking in large part in the system is facilitated partnerships.
I couldn't agree more, Patrick. I've been in the climate and global change enterprise for, if you include NASA, 25 years. That worldview that you're describing has been persistent the entire time. It's dominant. They're beginning to wane, but it is, and the reason they're waning is because what they're doing doesn't work. And, you know, we've been trying to get them to see a wider field for a long time. And I think some of it's humbling, but, you know, it requires changing worldviews for them. And that's a non-trivial task, as we know with all our other work, right? So anyway, it's a great topic. You know, I just want to, in our last few minutes, I want to explore something that I think, Frank, you tapped into, and I want to see anybody who's working in climate. It is a heavy load, and all of us who are able to carry that load for a long time have done things to make it possible. We have coping strategies, we have networks of support, we have different practices. I don't know if I ever remember in the CLEAN network we ever talked about that which we do to be able to do this work as a person. And, you know, I honestly think one of the values of the CLEAN network, why people keep on coming back, is because, you know, you've got my back. I've got your back. When you're down, I can pull you up. When I'm down, you'll pull me up. I know you know what it's like because you're on the same journey with me. And so when it gets hard, I have somebody I can talk to, because a lot of people I live with just don't get how hard this is, that what we're thinking about, and yet we persist. And so I think that just having a community of practice around that, which keeps us able to do the long work, because it is long work. Does that resonate with you all as something that, you know, in the ongoing new you know, every other week, that there informal time where we signal, let's talk about how we protect and take care of ourselves and each other? I see, Patrick, am I signaling to you that there's a topic we should put forth? I saw some thumbs, I saw some resonance. Does that work for you?
Yeah, I think it is a really interesting space to open up. I mean, we have talked a little bit about climate grief and students and how to navigate that realm, but I don't know if we've really sat with how we as individuals do this year after year and
after year,
let it in.
Yeah, fully, right? Frank, you have a hand?
Yeah, a quick response to Patrick in terms of the idea of scientists need to be better communicators. I think there's a gray area you're missing here, a really big gray area. And that's the people who do science education. And one of the things I'm going to push as a former community college instructor is that whole pool of people out there who have to get the science. In many cases, you need to have a PhD in the science to be able to teach, but yet you're communicating with people whose handle on science is, in many cases, middle school or elementary school level.
Right.
So I think that there's a vast pool of people out there that, before you say that scientists, before you question the efficacy of scientists becoming better communicators, realize that there are scientists like that out there.
Katie, did you have something you wanted to add, or was that just a hand movement?
It was just a hand movement, but I love this. I was just chatting with Patrick on the side to be like, oh, I'll start putting in the reminder emails, like what the discussion topics are for the, I really like having this idea of like the informal conversations kind of building off each other every other week and thinking about like what came out of this one. And I love this idea for the next one. So yeah.
Katie, I was thinking the same thing, that we need to signal the topic earlier, just so people can kind of like, oh, I want to be there for that. What is that? Just like we do with talks. So love it. Well, we only got a couple of minutes left. Is there anything else that needs to be said today? Any I forgot announcements? Any last things before we go into the rest of our week? Jenny, what you got?
Just one thread that was kind of like popping in and out of my head. I was worried it was going to be a zigzag, but it's this idea of like ways to, similar to like the intergenerational, I'm always coming up across how to talk to teachers about this stuff. Like we're often talking about how to kind of talk with youth about this, but for me, it's really like teachers who I'm trying to like convince and inspire and give practical strategies for. And also like talk about self-care and ways to continue doing this work. So I think to add on and just kind of think of ways that we can be thinking about this as teachers, as our audience too.
Wonderful. I think it's crucial. Patrick, and then that looks like we're going to close out. Looks like the clock's coming.
This is just a concluding comment to say that next week our presentation is Lauren Frank on a new book focused on entertainment education. And then our informal conversation the week after that is focused on presenting and teaching about climate change, and I think specifically on presenting it, which should be a nice prequel to the informal conversation on coping. So
wonderful. Thank you, Patrick. I love that. I love that like prelude. I think we need to do more signaling in this community because there's a lot of value here. So anyway, it's been an hour. I want to respect your all time. We got a lot going on and a lot to do. So, but thank you for joining us today, and take care of yourselves. Delta is real. So please protect yourselves and everyone you love and everyone around you, especially those kids who are 11 and younger or can't get vaccinated. Let's take care of each other. Be well, and see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, thanks.
All right, Patrick, you want to stop recording?